Yes, so let's move on to a film that is also too long, but maybe not necessarily for the same reason. Although maybe you enjoyed it more than I did, Scott, which is The Last Duel.
Yes, The Last Duel. The past is a foreign country, and they do things differently there. And France is also a foreign country, and they do things differently there too. So imagine how differently they must have done things in medieval France in the past. Speak English, for one, if Ridley Scott's Last Duel is to be believed, and it's based on a true story, so why wouldn't you believe it? This story, told three ways from each of the principal participants' viewpoints, of the trial by combat of Matt Damon's Sir John D. Bob Carol G's and Adam Driver's Jacques Legris, the latter of which is accused of raping the former's wife, Jodie Comer's Marguerite D. Bob Carol G's. Yes, I will use this all the way throughout. Sir John is up first, a brave but foolhardy soul who falls in hard times after the Caroline War and struggles to pay his dues to Ben Affleck's Count Pierre d'Alcanon, although his former squire, Jacques Legris, does try and soften Pierre's low opinion of Jean. Jean's fortunes improve after his marriage to the wealthy but disgraced de Thibouville family, but property squabbles with the Count, gifting away land from him to Legris, starts a feud that bubbles along until, when John's away fighting a disastrous campaign in Scotland, Legris rapes Marguerite. When a capricious justice system leads typically skewed results, he opts for trial by combat. The second part tells Legris' side of the same story, but it's a third part that truly packs the film's wallop, as Marguerite experiences the harrowing rape in altogether too gruesome detail, but does hammer home how awful women were treated in this time period, literally property of their husbands. The duel itself also has a fair degree of wallops and hammering, and show that Ridley's not forgotten the sword and sandals skills that he's picked up over the course of his career in a film that arguably harkens back to his debut in 1977 with The Duelists. Ridley Scott had some weird blame game thing going on about the relative commercial failure of this, something about millennials and mobiles which had some serious old man shouts at cloud vibes, particularly in the middle of a virulent pandemic. No, it is the audiences who are wrong. And I don't really blame them for their apathy. It's not that The Last Duel is a bad film on any axis I care to think of, but it's not a good one either. Rashomon and plate mail sounds like a winning formula, but the end result's just a bit drab. Visually drab in the main, which is most likely the quote-unquote authentic way to do things, and I have some respect for that, but it does wind up making the whole affair rather flatter than the drama of the story maybe deserves. Also, said story and characters seem to be chasing authenticity rather than interest, which, again, I have some respect for, but this is not a documentary. And much as it goes against every fibre of my being, I do kind of wish this had lead more into a little bit more heavily into the soap opera aspect of the tale. As it stands, oddly enough, it's maybe Ben Affleck that comes out of this the best, and certainly about a week on, he's the only character I remember with any life and vibrancy about him, or the only character that I remember full stop. I'm certain there's an audience for this that will really appreciate what it's set out to do, but it's much less of a fraction of the mainstream audience than Ridley Scott expected, apparently. And I think it's also fair to say that it's a well enough made film that it deserves to have been given a chance by more of that audience, but again, virulent pandemic going a virulent pandemic. I would say it's worth giving this a look from the safety of your sofa now that it's started popping up in home services. Even if it's not the most entertaining film that Ridley's ever made, it will satisfy people with a more grounded sensibility. 3.5 out of 5? Just?
Yeah, I would not recommend this. The word that comes to mind most readily for me to describe this was slog. I genuinely found this a miserable experience to watch. It doesn't help that, set aside the injustices and sort of, I guess you could say it's a way to sort of compare like modern day with then, and like how we've come a long way, but also in some ways not a long way.
Yeah. But
this film is about three of the things that I despise most: monarchy, feudalism, and religion. That was pretty much the entire film, so I was not having a good time, Scott. Yeah, I mean, it's not often you watch a film with so few likeable characters, in which case, I mean, in this case, I mean one. There was one likeable character, and that's the woman, who didn't, maybe by dint of the situation, didn't actually have much of a character, but it was her. It was Marguerite. She's the only likeable, sympathetic character. Everybody else is a monster of varying degree.
Yes.
Matt Damon, trying his best to do an English accent in France and failing. So strange. But we've covered that. Like the first thing he does when she tells him that she's been raped is, "Are you telling me the truth?" Well, I'm assuming we're not supposed to relate to that character then, because he's... Yes, I'm not going to swear. I don't like him. Well, let's leave it at that. Then it's so strange. Ben Affleck, who actually is quite entertaining in this, even though looking super weird with the bleach blonde hair.
Yes, very strange.
Is presumably from a different film.
Yeah.
He's effing and blinding everywhere and dropping the occasional, by which I mean many, C-bombs. Why? He's the only person in the film that swears at all, I think. Certainly swears like that. I assume it's some sort of attempt to make him seem different, that because he's the lord of the land, that he's got some sort of license to act in some sort of different or shocking manner. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really do anything. I was like, why are you doing that? What does that say? Although he at least was mildly entertaining while doing it, which was unlike almost all the rest of the film. So that's good, I guess. I didn't really see the point beyond to say, like, it's suggesting that he's, with his position of privilege, he was given license to act differently, and that's the way they show it, of him speaking in a way that nobody else would dare.
Yeah.
At the time, but it's not great. And going back to my point of there being no likeable or sympathetic characters, the guy playing the French king had a face that you'd basically never tire of kicking, jumping up and down on, or swing a baseball bat into. So, yeah, as violent a thought as that is, these are the thoughts that occupied my mind while I was struggling to get to the end of this. I found it a slog. I didn't enjoy it at all. It's not a bad film, in that you can't say the performances are bad, and it looks authentically miserable, I guess.
Yes.
And some of the settings are at least interesting looking. But even like the central conceit of the film, that this was the last duel of the whole idea of trial by combat is ridiculous, and it gets back into the whole religious nonsense, which was bothering me. But historical basis, fair enough. And that somehow, if you were right, God would let you win. And that would prove that you were right. Not anything like crazy, like, evidence. Anything like that. No, none of that nonsense. Trial by combat, that'll do you. I kind of wish they'd played into the duel part of it more, because it just sort of seems like somebody has the idea at some point and go, we'll do that now then.
Yeah.
The fact that hadn't been done for a while, would be outlawed soon. I kind of feel that they should have played into that a bit more, like that was like quite a significant event.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't feel like it is.
That event's more interesting than all the characters that are in it, which is perhaps my primary complaint. There's two complaints, that and also the fact that it's kind of doing the Rashomon thing, but it's not really. I was expecting to get a bit more of kind of a recontextualizing thing going on, and you just don't. You just get a bit more each time, but there does not seem to be any particular reason for that narrative device to be used rather than just telling a story normally. It's a bit of a waste of effort, really. Yeah,
and the difference between the three versions of the story are quite subtle. Yeah, so it's none of their stories differ enormously, certainly in terms of the details of like the significant part at the end.
Yeah. Fair enough, you get a bit more of a look at their character and what led up to it and what they thought was important. But again, nothing that actually recontextualizes it. That's just something you could have told in a normal narrative structure. So, a bit strange.
I had more joy, that's more luck, I guess, with the final section of the three viewpoints, the Jodie Comer's section. Because understandably, she's much more sympathetic than anybody else, and she's the one likeable character in the whole film. And that section, as I came towards the film, quite a bit more there. And that's because, probably she's the one that's not an arsehole. the one person in the whole film, it seems. And certainly I'm sympathetic to this character who's literally by law treated like property, as you said, Scott, that the idea is it's not that the rape was a crime against this woman, the rape was a crime against her husband somehow.
Yeah.
because morality is a thing that we only got quite recently, it seems. So that bit is more tolerable. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. It's just the whole film's just feels as miserable as the kind of grey sky, rainy setting that quite a lot of it happens in. I just felt like that for the whole film.
Yeah.
It's not one I'd recommend at all. I was just miserable watching this. I know it was, unfortunately Craig's not here to give us his opinion, but I know he enjoyed it quite a bit more than I did, and was particularly tickled by Ben Affleck's sweary performance. So I guess between the three of us, we're slightly more positive than negative. But for me, I hate. Well, I'm not hated. It's wrong. Again, there's obviously film craft there. It's well shot. Guess for the most part, it's well acted. Accents aside,
yeah.
And obviously the special effects and the Legree role. I'm sure you agree, Scott. Very, very good.
Yes, as always.
Some of ILM's best for that character, Mr. Driver there.
Yes.
But yeah, it's not like conventionally bad. It's a well-made film. It's just miserable.
Yeah.
It's just not a pleasant experience to watch.
Yeah, it's a very drab film. Drab seems to be the overwhelming word for it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a good time to watch. So I certainly get where you're coming from. I maybe respect it a little more by the sounds of it, but yeah, it is not really a fun time for anyone. So,
No.
yeah.